Mark, what do you make of this Seahawks team? We were wondering after that 49er game, all right, is that for real? Is that who we can count on this defense being moving forward? And at least the next game it certainly was. They held the Cardinals to 49 rushing yards. They hold them to 6 points, and this is a team that had put up 105 total points in their previous 4 games, their 4-game winning streak. So 2 back-to-back weeks where division rivals were their opponent, and this defense put on a show. What's your take on it?
Yeah, I mean, listen, man, the Cardinals, and I've done a bunch of Cardinals games. Like James Conner is that's a football player in Jesse, man. He will run you over. A big physical dude, great downhill runner, really understands, he understands how to push and then how to cut back. And, he's a damn good football player. To hold him, I think he had 7 carries for 8 yards. That's legitimate, man. When you have that ability, that is legitimate to make them throw the ball 40-some-odd times and only give up 6 points with the weapons that they have. I just think that was tremendous. And I go back to McDonald when he was at Baltimore and how versatile that defense was and how the depth of that defense, all the different coverage stuff, all the different, simulated pressures, all the different things that they did. And maybe it's just one of those things that it takes time. It takes time to understand the nuance. It takes time to understand the communication. It takes time to kind of play with one another. And I'm telling you what, they look great. Leonard Williams was freaking phenomenal. That was, and I did not get to watch the entirety of the game, but I watched a bunch of it. And that was a butt whipping right there.
Yeah, and a couple of players, and we were talking about 2 guys on the opposite end of the spectrum size-wise. I mean, I don't think that there's a defensive tackle / end who's 6'5", 310 or 320 pounds, whatever Leonard is. And then on the other side, you got 5'11", 180-pound Witherspoon, who is just all over the field. And I feel like, that's, well, first of all, with Leonard Williams, you ever seen a guy like that, Mark? I mean, is he – I know that was just one game, but right. I feel like he can do that, and he's been doing it more and more. Like, for a guy that big to be able to split double teams, and he pretty much whooped every single player on that offensive line because he was moving around. How do you handle a guy like that? And then on the other side, Witherspoon is just all over the place.
Yeah, Witherspoon he's fun to watch, man. What just another reason that I hate the Seahawks because of the fleecing of the Denver Broncos, because he's one of the guys I do believe you guys got in that fleecing of us. So, although, you know what, I feel better now that Bo Nix is playing well. But in regards to Leonard Williams, understand where he's been, man. He got drafted by the Jets. That's where players get drafted to go and die. The New York, that's what happens to you. Remember when Aaron Rodgers was good? Right up until the point he went to the Jets. And then it was like, oh, my gosh. So the Jets. And then Leonard Williams was from the Jets to the Giants. And the Giants are an abject disaster. The Giants, that line of bullet, you got to fire everybody. Brian Dable's a buddy of mine, a good buddy. You got to fire everybody. The fact that you go, if you're the New York Giants, and you say Drew Lock was good enough to be our backup, good enough to take the backup reps, good enough to spell the starter. If the starter got hurt, he would go into the game, good enough to do that for 11 straight games. Then we get to the point where we bench Daniel Jones, and all of a sudden, Tommy Cutlets knows the offense better. The guy who hasn't taken a freaking rep all season long doesn't even get the scout team reps. He throws pat and go in practice. All of a sudden, that guy gives us a better opportunity. Shame on you, New York Giants. Shame on you. And so those are the 2 organizations that Leonard Williams came from. So maybe this kind of resurgence and this, the way he's playing right now, maybe this is the first time he's actually played somewhere that, they are relying on him. They're counting on him. They're actually holding him accountable, and he's excelling. And I've always known the talent, and he's had some of those games where you're like, boy, the dude's unblockable. But he was certainly unblockable on Sunday.
What do you attribute the turnaround to? Dave's brought up that the inside linebackers were problematic, that Baker and Dodson just didn't fit what they wanted to do. They got rid of both of them, even though those were their offseason acquisitions. They bring in Ernest Jones, and you got the rookie and Tyrese Knight, who's shown very well in these two games. Is it as simple as those two guys being swapped out, because we're raving about Witherspoon, we're raving about Williams, it just feels like is it just a new system finally making sense? What do you chalk it up to?
I think it's probably a little bit of everything, right? New system making sense, guys communicate. Like there's a lot that goes on when you put it in a new system from just a communication standpoint, and it's not just like communicating on a grease board, but especially like when you go on the road too, and we always talk about noise, crowd noise for an offense, and how difficult that is on the road. But when you're playing at home, the crowd noise for the defense, like the defenses, they got to deal with that crowd noise that the offense is dealing with. So now it becomes nonverbal communication, and those skills take time. It takes time to read each other and to overlap one another and to play for one another and to do all those things. So I think it's a bunch of everything. We just figure you plug players in and they're going to be great, and different schemes and different systems fit different players' eyes and different players' abilities better. And I just think it takes time to figure out who's who and what a guy can do and what a guy can't do. And the other thing is, for me, is I always think about, put a guy in a position to lose. Don't be surprised when he loses. You're the dumbass that put him there. And so many coaches put guys in positions like they go, hey, we want you to do this. And you're like, well, I'm incapable of doing that. And a lot of guys just can't speak up for themselves because they don't have that kind of clout or juice. And so there's a lot of coaches that there's just a lot of, Dave will tell you, there's just a lot of dumb coaches in the NFL. So finding the right guys and plugging the right guys into the right system and doing those things, that takes a little bit of time.
That was Mark that said dumb coaches. I've never said that in my life.
Never.
Come on. Let me go through my text messages when you're on one of your vendors.
Hey, another guy, by the way, that's excelled out here that was with the Giants, Julian Love. And it seems like just a train wreck right now. We were talking about Malik Neighbors popping off, about Dable, but the other one is the most interesting because the Seahawks are playing the Jets on Sunday. But now there's something about that Aaron Rodgers is shunning any kind of like imaging, like X-rays and analysis or whatever. And Ulbrich says, "Oh, that's news to me." Is that the biggest mess right now, or is it the Giants?
Yeah, no, that's also, they're both equally messy. And but I get Rodgers. He doesn't need an MRI. He's been immunized, so he'll be fine. That guy. I don't know what happened to him, man. He and I used to be good buddies, and then he just went off the deep end. He started dating celebrities and. He's into Ouija boards or whatever he's into. Who knows?
Darkness retreats, ayahuasca,
butter retreats, and all the stuff that he's doing. I don't understand. I don't understand how you get so off the beaten path. But it is a mess. And I tell you what, it just got to be miserable. Now Woody Johnson is hiring his former GM to find a GM. I've gone through this extensive search, exhaustive search, and I haven't found anybody. So I guess I'm just going to take over as the GM again. What are we doing? I'm putting my name in the hat, Woody. I'll take over for you guys. I've always wanted to be a GM.
Hey, I asked Dave this, and I'm guessing your answer would be similar, but we brought up Malik Neighbors, and it's just part of the dysfunction of the Giants. But this is a guy who's not even through his rookie season yet. And his quote, he was being talked to after the game, he says, go out there first, second quarter, don't get the ball. Start getting targets at the end. I can't do that. You can't do that. Start getting the ball when it's 30-0. What do you want me to do? And then they asked him about, what do you do about it? And he goes, I don't know. Talk to Dable about that. And I'm reading that going, all right, is that a leader in development? Is that a guy who's taking the bull by the horns and saying, no, we can't stand for this, we got to do better? Or is that a rookie who's developing an attitude already that's going to just be a problem down the road? How do you view that as a guy that's been in that locker room?
Well, that's a guy that needs his ass whipped behind closed doors. I get that it's a mess, right? But again, the further you get away from the football, the less you know about the game. Like receivers, let's face it, when it comes to just football acumen, they're not the Mensa Society out there in the water. Like they don't know a lot. And so, like you watch what went down in that game. I mean, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on every first down for the first 5 first downs. I have the Bucs this weekend, so I watched I broke down the game. They blitzed on every first down. I mean, they put them behind the chains every first down. Tommy DeVito had no idea what was going on. Yeah, he started getting the ball. Listen how clueless this kid is. He started getting the ball in late in the third quarter. You know why? They called off the freaking Dogs. They were up 30-0. They said, "Okay, we'll let you complete a few passes now." I mean, it was. They brought so much pressure early. That poor Tommy DeVito, man. Tommy Cutlets looked like. I mean, he looked like a pound of chicken breast that they were going to make a chicken parm out of. That poor kid took a beating. And so, again, here's a kid that doesn't understand that 10 other people have to do their job exceptionally well for you to sniff a football. Shut up. Again, I mean, that's the immaturity of young players that play wide receiver and think just overvalue themselves, most overvalued position in football. So, anyhow, but that's, I digress.
Well, Mark, we were just talking about how the defense really has fixed itself. I mean, and I think it's what everybody expected out of a Mike Macdonald defense. And I think, a lot of it was personnel. I do think that they simplified a little bit. They haven't really said that, but just from hearing it, it's like, okay, let's keep it like to the primary calls. And Mike Macdonald yesterday talked about, it's got to make sense to guys, and I think it's all starting to come together on defense. But what about when you've seen the offensive line here? I think Anthony Bradford had an ankle injury on like the third play. They've got a rookie there. You got a second year guy at center. Do you think the run game, is my question, can repair midway through the season like the defense did from what you've seen from this offense?
I think so, Dave. It's funny. I just was doing a different radio show talking about just when you struggle, especially in offense. And my thought process is always kind of there's an old country song by Neil McCoy. It was called "Small Up and Simple Down." And I think one of the best things you can do as a football team when things are struggling is to simplify things, to settle things down a little bit. And you remember City Slickers, the movie City Slickers, when they were out there on the trail and Curly, the old Western cowboy, said, "Hey, the secret of life is this one thing." He put his finger up and goes, "This one thing," and then he died, and they never found out what the one thing is. Like my whole thought process when it comes to offensive football and you're struggling is make it about one thing. Mm-hmm. What is one thing, especially in the run game, what is one thing that we do well, right? And so, okay, we do this really well. This one thing that we do well. How can we build off that? How can we make that one thing look like 7 different things? How can we have one guy change the formation or one guy change the motion, or, we exchange instead of slipping the backside, we man up the backside and let the back go through, whatever it is. And now we can take that one thing and we can make it look like 7 different things to the defense. And so we can become really good at that. And my thought process is always this, like people ask, how were we so good when I was in Denver and we were running the ball? Because we ran 6 plays. I mean, that's really what we did. And ultimately it becomes the 10,000 hour rule, or the 10,000 time rule. You can line up in anything you want. We can run 18 handoff or 19 handoff, 19 handoff force, 19 handoff weak, 19 handoff strong. We can run 19 toss, 19 pitch. We can run 19, whatever we want to run, 19 toss crack, whatever it is. I've run those plays 10,000 times. You've defended them 100 times. I'm better than you. You can line up in anything you want. I'm better than you because I've run it 10,000 times and you haven't defended it 10,000 times. And so how can we simplify our run game? How can we simplify our offense and create, one play that looks like 7 different plays to a defense, and then have 5 different play actions off of that, hardcore run play action stuff off of that looks identical to it. Now you're talking about, a playbook that ultimately, when you talk about motions and you talk about shifts and you talk about personnel groupings, that one play now all of a sudden became 5 run plays. And it became another 7 or 8 different play action aspects to it that are key to it. And now all of a sudden you're talking about 30 different plays off of that one thing that we do well. And so those things to me are really important, and they're simple. And that to me ultimately is what wins. And you talked about them simplifying a little bit, even though they say, nobody will say they did. Yeah. Like that stuff matters.
Hey, Mark, looking at the other teams in this division, we just saw the Cardinals, and now the 49ers we saw the week before. They went out there and just got their tails handed to them by the Packers. Of course, they were going with Brandon Allen. Brock Purdy was out. But, on the heels of that game, I'm just, hearing all the fans out there that they got a problem with Kyle Shanahan. All of a sudden, he doesn't know football. How do you sum up what we're seeing from the 49ers? Is this just the attrition getting to them, guys being hurt, especially the quarterback, or is Shanahan at fault for what we're seeing with the 49ers? Are we at the end of the run with them? What do you think?
Well, yeah, I think there's a lot that has to do with injuries, and then there's a lot that has to do with nuance of football. Like when you have a bunch of guys injured and there's 1 or 2 guys that you're trying to replace, up front, and there's 2 receivers that you're trying to tie together, and then you talk about a team that uses a ton of different motions, and their run game is it's simple, but it's diverse in that we have a bunch of different entry points. Like when we're talking about multiple tight ends or a tight end or a fullback, we may block a defensive end, and it may be, you think about this, it may be a combination between tackle, tight end. Then it may be a combination, we oftentimes will call that like tray. And then it'll be a quad between 2 tight ends. And then it'll be a tight end and a fullback from the inside. Then it'll be a tight end and a fullback from the outside that blocks that defensive end. And then the wide tight end will arc release, and the tight end and the fullback will load him from the inside. Or it'll be the opposite tight end that's coming across the formation and basically runs some type of trap as the tight end arc releases. So you've got all these different aspects of how we're going to block an edge, right? And they've done it better than anybody in football. And now all of a sudden, well, we don't have George Kittle. Or we don't have, Deebo Samuel that's a part of that. Or we don't have, our backup tight end because he's hurt. Or, all of a sudden we've lost our F receiver that's our motion guy and our movement guy. And so now we're starting, a rookie there. Like that stuff matters, the nuance of that. And so you try to run all that stuff and you run it in practice and you talk about it on a grease board. You do all that. And it sounds great, right? And in walkthrough speed, you can do it, and then all of a sudden you get into a game, and there's a different level of intensity, a different level of speed where things happen, and you get edged a little bit, and the next thing you know, you don't block your guy, and they're in the backfield, and now it's 2nd down and 13, and it's really hard to run an offense when you're off schedule, and they've just been off schedule. They haven't made explosive plays, and I think it all has to do with the intricacy of that offense and the fact that you've got a bunch of backup players playing.
Well, I was hoping you were going to say that was the end of their run because I'm tired of seeing them. So,
yeah, well, I'm telling you, they're going to Buffalo right this weekend, and they're struggling as a football team. They're struggling, and man, if they don't win in Buffalo, man, I think it is the end of this season.
Yeah. He is Mark Schlereth. He is with us each and every week. It's Can't Miss Radio each and every time. Mark, always great stuff.